right, Hurley, what are we working on today? Oh. Well, it would be nice if we could finally get a winch on this thing. Wow, would you look at that? An Openroad 12K winch just dropped out of the sky. Sorry for that terrible transition. Don't know why I decided to do that in this video of all videos, but here we are. So believe it or not, I have never owned a four-wheel drive that had a winch on it. That spans across the Land Cruiser, the Toyota pickup, the 4Runner, and the other, 5 Toyota 4Runners that I've had in the past. I've never had a winch. I've always had a friend there to save me. But now that I live out in Idaho without any friends, I do not have friends to save me. So when Openroad reached out and said, hey, you want to try out the winch? I said, yeah, sure, let's try it out. So let's unbox this thing and check out what's in the box. Again, I'm a total newbie to winches, so I'm not really sure exactly what I'm looking at in there, but we're gonna mount it hopefully on the inside of this ARB bumper. If I know one thing about installs that are supposed to be easy, it is that they are not. So we'll see what kind of trouble we get ourselves into. The winch comes with everything that you would expect it to come with. We have the winch itself, a hook with a pull strap, 2 wireless remotes, 1 wire remote, all of the mounting bolts, a fair lead, some merch like a hat and some stickers, and then the user manual. Now at first glance, it does seem like the 4 mounting bolts on the ARB bumper. Am I jinxing myself? I think I'm jinxing myself. I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it. Stay tuned. I don't remember this thing being that heavy, but I don't want to drop it on my foot. This thing is very light. Well, whatever. I don't regret taking the safety precaution, but yeah, this thing's not very heavy. But it wouldn't be fun to have to reinstall it with a winch on it, so maybe we just put this thing on the ground. Well, we got the shop down to 93 degrees at 30% humidity, which isn't comfortable, but it's not terrible. I got my makeshift exhaust fan up there, as you guys can see. We're doing what we can out here. That's sending all the hot air out that's trapped up in the roof. We got the ceiling fan on, and I'm running this Air 5300 CFM swamp cooler. It works, I guess. We really need to get like a mini split in here to really cool this place down, but that's a project for the winter or next summer. Anyway, got the bumper off. Totally not as heavy as I thought it was, and I don't know about you guys. I feel like every vehicle looks better with the bumper removed. I don't know why. There's something about the front of a car missing, or if a car is like, this is gonna sound weird, if a car is wrecked, they almost look better to me for some reason. I don't know. But I think on these ARB bumpers, we don't have the standard winch plate on the bottom here. The winch itself, I believe, actually mounts to the face right here. And if there's wind noise in this microphone, I apologize. I'm standing in front of the swamp cooler. But anyway, let's see if the winch bolts up. Well, it looks like it's going to. On the ARB bumpers, you have different provisions for different size winches, I believe. So you can see we have 2 holes at the top and the hole on the bottom there. And it seems to me like these 4 mounting holes are going to line up perfectly with the ARB bumper. Things are going suspiciously well. This is weird. All right, there are two issues at the moment. Issue number one, which is the big issue, is that the winch hits the inside corners of the bumper. So I'm gonna have to come up with a spacer to solve that. And number two is that I definitely need to clock this winch. So I'm gonna, I believe, just loosen up these Allen screws and turn it so that I can clock this in the way that it needs to be. Actually, there's three issues. Issue three is that the fair lead is not going to fit. We're gonna need, I believe, an offset fair lead to make it fit on that bumper because the mounting holes get in the way. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm just guessing here, so we'll see if it works. Wrong size.
Be right back.
I want it to be able to go into free spool without me having to reach behind the bumper, and I think that the control panel, everything should be on the top, so I think I need to clock this. Oh, okay. So this basically just looks like a locking hub inside. It's kind of interesting. You can only get it so straight because the body of the winch is not going to move, but the gears inside will, as you can see here. So we line up basically like this. I think that's good enough, right? Because this is going to mount inside the bumper, and now our dial is here for the lock and the spool. We should just be able now to drop all these guys back in there. Well, I was hoping that I could rotate this side too, and I can, but it's not going to rotate the part that I wanted to rotate. I wanted this to mount on top so that it was easy to access all that kind of stuff if I ever needed to, but I don't think it's possible because the actual mounting is inside of this aluminum piece, not on this I'll just call this a control box that I can rotate. So I can rotate this piece, but this part is fixed. The mounting holes are on the bottom here, so these mounting holes here that would hold this bracket would need to move, and they can't, so that's all right. We'll just put it back together. And at least we have our spool over here rotated, and that'll solve that problem. So you can see my collection of spacers that I've tried to no avail. So now I have these spare pieces of scrap flat bar. I'm gonna guess these are, they're a little bit thicker than 1/4 inch. Maybe they are exactly 1/4 inch, I don't know. But I'm gonna cut these to shape. So basically, imagine that this is, let's just say this is 6 inches from center to center. We're just gonna have that whole thing as a spacer, and that's how we're going to get the room we need to be able to mount that winch behind the ARB bumper. And then once those spacers are made, we're gonna have to go to the hardware store to pick up longer bolts, because of course the bolts that came with it are not gonna be long enough once those spacers are in there. You guys remember what I said about easy jobs? Yeah. That's the best $100 I've ever spent. Time to get a swag mount for it though. It is a disaster in the shop right now, but we're getting there. Got the mounts made. Also picked up this drill press from a yard sale. Worth its weight in gold. So much better than breaking your arm trying to drill when it catches and yanks your whole arm. Yeah, But yeah, have the seats torn apart from the last episode, have all this junk everywhere from the bumper, but I think I finally got the mounts where I want them to be. I have them hang drying right here. They did have to be 1/2 inch in order to get the clearance required to fit the winch in this bumper. And I mean, that's not the winch, that's the bumper. It has these little ears right here that come up. Not every bumper is gonna be like that. But what I do think is cool about the design of the ARB is the bolts are not in shear. So when you're pulling from the winch, it's not pulling the bolt off of the actual winch platform, it's in tension, it's pulling it towards itself. At least I think that's how it works, which is kind of a cool design. And I have considered swapping out that bumper in the past, but bumpers are expensive. It came with the Land Cruiser, and I figured we might as well just leave it on there. But anyway, the next big hurdle that might happen is this control box might hit the lower valance right here. It might hit that, but we're not gonna know until we put it back on. Fortunately, I am running out of time. It is 8 o'clock. I gotta go to the gym still. I gotta prep my meals for the week, you know, just normal human activities that you have to do before the next work week starts. This is not my job. This is just a hobby. Hopefully one day it can be my job. But as I said, we are out of time. So I'll see you guys when I have some more time. It's gonna seem like 1 second in the video, probably multiple days for me. Finally got the winch into the bumper. The mounts worked great. As I was saying, that fair lead is not the right one. Since it's an ARB bumper, we need an offset fair lead to close this upper gap right here that I'm not sure if you can see on camera. There's a gap above the actual fair lead right here. And then since it's not offset, the actual synthetic line will be rubbing on the metal of the bumper, not the inside of the fair lead. So I do have one of those on the way. Another thing, we're gonna have to re-spool this. Pretty sure a winch line should be spooled from the bottom, not the top. Let's see, I got all of the cabling, there's not much, there's just a positive and a negative, routed and sleeved through these little openings here on the ARB bumper. Fits nicely there. And with the spacers on, I only had 35 thousandths of an inch of clearance in between this piece of plastic and the inside face of the bumper right there. So it just barely fit. But now the question is will that control box clear the Land Cruiser in this area right here with that spacer? Let's find out. Not gonna fit. And we're not even close to having that bumper lined up yet. We're still like 1/2 inch off and we're already contacting. I could just move it down. If I mess with that bracket, I could probably just move this, what is that? Maybe an inch lower, 2 inches lower. And we should be able to clear the truck because I don't want to cut that. I really don't. This might actually be pretty easy. You see this bracket right here. This is how it's oriented on the back of the control panel, so on the back of the winch. And if I could just lower this down, the width or the space in between these two bolt holes, so if it had a third bolt hole like right here, and I could just shift it down, it would fit perfectly. So I'm just gonna weld another piece of steel right here, drill a hole through it, and we should be good. Well, unfortunately, all this work that I'm currently doing is going to have to all be reversed. I had planned to run this with the clutch on the passenger side, the right side of the vehicle, but it turns out that if I run it that way, I'm gonna have to re-spool the winch, as I said in that previous clip, which after talking to the Openroad engineers might actually cause it to lose its braking functionality. So I'm just gonna flip the whole thing over. I have to remake this mount the opposite way. I have to reclock the clutch the opposite way, take the bumper back off, put the bumper back on, and basically just redo everything, but it's no big deal. Got both stuck. Woo! So the plan is I'm just gonna zip off this edge right here, round out this corner, drill my new hole. Are the welds beautiful? No, not at all. As I said, I am learning TIG still, so this is a brutal learning curve, but I don't know. It's not gonna break. It's just a bracket for a little electric box. All right, there it is, the completed bracket. You see, when you take a grinder to your welds, you're not as bad of a welder all of a sudden. You know, I definitely didn't get enough filler right there or right here, but again, this is not some structural brackets, it's a very simple support bracket. So anyway, got the hole drilled, got a little gusset on there, got it all ground down. Now I just got to paint it. All right, well, with the bumper back on, now we just got to tighten all the mounting bolts, hook up the power wire and negative wire for the winch, and test this thing out. Now, I did read in the instructions for this that we can't flip the polarity of the winch, and that we also should not reverse the spooling direction, because it can stop the braking function of the winch. So that's why, or that's another reason why I decided just to flip the winch over instead of trying to re-spool it to come out on the bottom here. Everything is ready to go. I have the winch hooked up to the battery here. Yes, it's just connected directly to the battery, and you should always have a kill switch here for the winch that's turned off when you're not using it, because if this thing goes on its own, it's gonna pull itself into the bumper, completely destroy the bumper, maybe do worse damage, maybe burn itself up, and, you know, worst case scenario, catch your truck on fire. But I'm gonna take care of that in the future. So what I'm gonna do after we test this thing right now is I'm just going to disconnect the winch and leave it disconnected. Let me know if you guys have any ideas for maybe some sort of fuse block or something we can use to clean up any of the hot wires that are going straight to that terminal. I do need to swap the battery out. I do need to replace the terminals. So let me know if you have any ideas. Let's go ahead and test this thing out. So it has this wireless remote, and then it does have a wired remote too. I'm gonna start with the wireless one and just see how it works. It says to hold the button for 3 seconds, it'll turn on. And then let's go ahead and just, I guess, do in and see if it pulls that cable in. Yeah, it works. Let's go out. I believe it should be the same thing for the actual wired controller. Just take off this little rubber plug. This looks like it can go in only one way. There's a little protrusion right there. So, all right, and now this should also work. And it does. So now we're going to be handling the final step of this winch install, which is going to be pre-tensioning the line. I've seen a couple of videos from other people and winch manufacturers that show this. Basically, you just pull the line out in free spool and you attach to something and you just winch to pre-stretch that synthetic line. So luckily, we have a road here. Got the Land Cruiser here, and then we have an uphill road up there to my F-150. I'm just gonna get my wife in there and I'm gonna pull this thing up to that area, and I think that should do it. So the line right now is taut. The Land Cruiser is in neutral and it's on a pretty steep hill right now. You can see the braking function is still working. I wanted to make sure of that since I reclocked the clutch. I just wanted to make sure that it's still locked, and we're looking like we're good. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this thing up pretty close to the Ford to stretch the line, and then we'll just spool this thing nice how it's supposed to be, and we'll be done. All right, so the winch install is complete. As I said at the beginning of the video, I am new to winching and basically all forms of recovery since, as I've said, I've just got lucky and never really needed it. But a couple of takeaways, if you guys are new to this as well, that I learned while installing that winch. Obviously, the first one is that it's not just guaranteed to fit in your bumper. You might need to make spacers or mounts or something to either space the winch out or, you know, get space for the control box or whatever. The second thing is that your wire or your rope needs to come out from the bottom of the winch, and there's a winching direction on the actual winch itself, and there's tons of videos on YouTube and stuff basically all saying you need to come out of the bottom of the winch, not the top. If it comes out of the top, it can mess up the braking function of the winch, which is obviously very important because you need it to be able to hold itself when it's going up a hill. If it starts rolling the other way, that's obviously very bad. Now, I have heard of people just reversing the polarity of the winch, which is what I was going to try to do when I had it mounted in there the first way that I had it. But after I talked to the engineer at Openroad, they said that that might affect the braking function, and they just recommend to install it essentially the way that it's supposed to be installed. So that's one of the other reasons why I flipped it around. The third thing that I learned is that you have to stretch a synthetic rope before you use it for the first time. I saw some videos from Warren and Ronnie Dahl and some other people that all basically said the same thing, that you need to put a load on it before you use it for the first time, like we just did. And I would say the last thing that I learned that's pretty important is that you need to have some sort of cutoff switch for the power lead to that winch. Don't just leave it hooked up to the hot on the battery all the time, because it could turn on for some reason and it could basically winch your bumper into itself. There's just a million flies out here. People have had issues with it basically winching itself when it's, you know, technically off. And that's not just with an Openroad winch, that's with other brands of winches too. So make sure you have some sort of cutoff or some sort of way to kill it. But anyway, that's gonna wrap it up for this video, guys. As always, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.